Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Content Workshop, where we talk about content in depth. Today, I am joined by Halina, aka BlondeVenom. Halina is a good friend of mine that I have known since she was on Panda Gaming as the head of marketing over there. And right now, currently, she is the head of content and marketing for the CavsLegion 2K League team. Halina, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm so glad that you joined me for this. Like I said in the introduction video on Twitter, for me this was an obvious first episode choice as far as having you on because like I told you in text, and I don't mean to sound corny right off the bat, but like you were someone that like I looked up to in esports as a professional, and someone that like to me is a clear and obvious choice to listen to when it comes to going from just starting to going full time. Like if someone wants a really good idea of how you can get into esports really quickly and some of the leaps you have to take in order to get into esports, I think you were a perfect example of that. So you were one of the obvious choices for me for this podcast, especially the first episode. But
Thank
to
you. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. But to start, Helena, just to make it easy, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and give your background as much as you want, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. No, and to preface this, I usually don't sound like this. I'm just sick.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, just to preface this whole thing. But yeah, I'm Halina Malik, aka Blonde Venom is my gamer tag. Um, but pretty much currently right now, I'm the manager of content and marketing, like you said, for the Cavs. I've only been here for about 2.5 years. So before that, I was with Panda Gaming that had a bunch of different professional esports teams under it. So we had a Call of Duty team, some Rainbow Six teams. I know you're familiar with it, but
Yeah, of course, for the listeners.
yeah. But before that, I was kind of bouncing around between other esports teams, either between playing competitively on the major league circuit, going to different events, or bouncing around trying to find some kind of internships with other teams. So I've always kind of been in the esports scene, either as a player or behind the scenes.
Okay. Yeah, and kind of how I said and how you just like preface it, and we'll get more into it as the podcast goes along. But to me, as Panda, I think actually had a really talented staff. Like,
And a big
Anthony's.
staff.
Yeah,
It
we
was
had
a
a big
huge staff.
staff, and like Austin was like multifaceted. You obviously are doing what you're doing now. Anthony Graves, who I'll have on the podcast as well,
Okay.
is doing stuff with the record, and he's also doing his own thing. So like, I feel like there was a really talented cast there, and but even at that level, like you went from that to what you are now very quickly, and like it was a long process to get there, which we'll talk about, but it was really shows how quickly like you can move ahead in
Yeah, there were no
esports.
steps in between. It was Panda and then Cavs. Like there
Yeah,
was nothing in the
exactly.
middle,
There were
which is
there
kind of wild.
you didn't go up a stairs. You just like jumped up to the top really quickly,
That's a good way to put it.
Which is awesome. But yeah, so thank you for the background. Overall, I guess the one thing I wanted to talk about first was what originally got you into esports as a whole.
Yeah, so I think um even as a kid, which is super funny, if you would go to like McDonald's with your family, there would be like those little arcade games, and instead of going in the playhouse,
Mm-hmm.
I would like beg my parents for quarters to like play Galaga
Okay.
on the arcade machines. So for some reason, like I always liked gaming. But esports in particular, it was really coincidental that there was actually a gaming cafe that opened up about 2 minutes from my house in Pittsburgh, and it was
Okay.
called Game On Party Planners, was what it was called. And it was this super, super rinky dinky, like, like I can't even tell you, like basement, like is the best word to describe it. And
Okay.
it was like 16 stations in a room. It was Xboxes and PlayStations, no computers. It was just console gaming. And I walked in. Coincidentally, it was their grand opening because I knew I've never seen it before. And passing that same street every day, I'm like, that's not supposed to be there. What's that? So I walked right in, and I was just like amazed that there was a building, like a location that
Mm,
you could go to play.
yeah.
So every day after school, I would hop right off the bus. I would go straight to the LAN center and basically just play Call of Duty every day because I really liked different games.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked Call of Duty a lot. And all my friends would play zombies there. And I think I was like 14, 15 at the time. And I begged this guy for a job. And I probably shouldn't be saying this because it's probably not legal to work at that age in Pennsylvania. But
Be all
I
right.
begged him, begged him, begged him, begged him for a job. And he finally got me a job. I think I was like 15 or 16. I would help him edit his website. We would throw gaming birthday parties. So I would kind of manage that.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of flyers, I would just make these really, really crappy like Photoshop flyers for the land
Hey,
center.
at
And
the time they weren't crappy. They
at
were
the
awesome.
time, they were great.
Yeah, they're
they
awesome.
were perfect. Um, and so eventually we shifted from birthday parties to tournaments. And
Mm.
so we threw a Call of Duty tournament and ended up I was pretty okay at it. And pretty decent within like my local area like of Pittsburgh at the time.
And what Call of
Um,
Duty was that? If do you remember?
that was so I started in Black Ops 2 and then I didn't get good until Ghosts.
Okay, so you're
So
at the
Ghost,
heyday area.
yeah.
Mhm.
The Black Ops 2 I played a lot. Wasn't very good at the time, but then through the tournaments, I think we developed tournaments in Ghosts.
Mhm.
And so we would only get like 5 teams. I think our biggest tournament ever was maybe 8 to 10 teams tops. They weren't huge tournaments, but I would always kind of like climb up in those rankings.
Mhm.
And eventually we decided to make a team because there was an event in Columbus, and Columbus from Pittsburgh is only a 3-hour drive.
Okay.
So we were like, we could drive there. There's no flights. There's no like anything crazy needed. Let's go. Let's rep the land center. So we
Mhm.
made these really crappy jerseys that said game on party planners. And we went to our first tournament in Columbus.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's so funny how like, and I think about it now too, because I went to a couple events, like a couple majors, like at the time, like it was like the coolest thing ever. Like looking
Mhm.
back out now, like as an adult, I guess is the best word to put it. Like you're like, that is so cringy. But
It was a little
at the
cringy.
time you thought like you were like about to go pro and be the next freaking whatever player. Like it was like the best thing ever.
I remember
Um,
walking into Columbus and they were sponsored by Dr. Pepper at the time, and there
mhm.
were these like huge barrels of Dr. Pepper with like
Ugh.
and you could just grab one and I was like just like blown away. I'm like, "Oh my God, free Dr. Pepper?" Like I
Yeah.
thought it was like the best thing that's ever happened to me.
I'm so mad about that Dr. Pepper sponsorship because I didn't like not to derail the podcast take like literally 10 seconds. I didn't like learn about esports until literally AW. Like I grew up in a backwoodsy farmy area. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't allowed to play video games that much like until I was older. So I didn't even get introduced to esports till
Ugh.
AW. So I missed the whole like Dr. Pepper like the heyday
Ugh.
of like that Halo, and
Ugh.
like
Yes.
Black Ops 2 time frame where they had like keynote blue chip sponsors for
Yes.
a little bit. And
Ugh.
I'm still salty that I wasn't there during that time. But that's a
Ugh.
different.
You missed a lot. So
Yeah, I
even
did.
even that rinky dinky Pittsburgh Land Center, we actually partnered with AGL to host AGL Pittsburgh.
Okay.
It was the Halo tournament, and there were I think like 15 teams that showed up for Halo, and I Ninja won, and I interviewed Ninja as part of this like land center. So there's this really crappy YouTube clip of me at like 15 years old, who's like way too skinny and just like even pastier than I am now, and I'm just like, I have no idea who any of these people are. Don't know who Ninja is. Like he wasn't big at the time,
No,
and I'm
yeah.
like, so you won a tournament?
That's so funny. I would keep that. That's a clip you keep when until you're like, in your 30s and 40s and you're like, "Hello, like look what I that like it's just like something to look back on and be really funny."
For sure, for sure.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so you were competing, you went to Columbus and what went on from there? So like it's unfolding the chronological order of how esports unfolded for you.
Yeah, I was pretty good for a while, and I was really happy about where I was as a player. There was a female pro league that developed that was super fun to be a part of,
Mhm.
where a bunch of females could form teams and play for prize money, which was never really heard of in North American esports.
Mhm.
This was something that was really popular in like European esports, like CS:GO in Europe. Has had a female scene for a while,
Yeah, it
but
has.
female pro league was like one of the first things in North America, and was so happy to be a part of it. But after a certain while, like you kind of see your skills going like this a little bit,
Mhm.
especially when I went to college for a 4-year degree, so you can't put a lot of time into gaming.
Nah.
You just kind of see it peaking like this,
Mhm.
and for me to want to get my degree, kind of had to take that step back a little bit and say, hey, I still want to be in esports. How can I be there without being a player?
Mhm.
So through all these events like Columbus, AGL Halo, um, uh, networking and meeting these people who like own these organizations and
Mhm.
being like, hey, do you need help? Do you need any help?
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Yeah, exactly, and especially back then, because I mean, people in the scene can kind of see it, but then maybe even they don't see it. But people outside the scene, especially, don't understand how like at a cyclic rate esports is developed as far as jobs and like the infrastructure about it. Because I would say 6 years ago, it was like, you think it's a wild wild west now, like it was literally like just like
Even 4 years
hodge.
ago.
Yeah, 4 years, it was a hodgepodge of like how you
Yeah.
got a job, how you could help an organization.
Oh my
Like you
gosh.
could honestly be doing volunteer work for what was considered like a tier one organization pretty easily and like quickly. But now it's still easy and easier now, but it's back then it was unreally like different than it was now.
I mean, you even take Panda, who had pro teams,
Yeah.
pro Call of Duty teams. We had a crazy large staff, and
Hmm.
it was really like we got, not to say it wasn't exclusive, but we wanted to get a lot of people. We wanted to get a lot of people underneath our organization because we felt that having I won't say employees, but having staff at our org was almost influencers in and of itself. Like they would spread the word, and it kind of we kind of proved ourselves right when MLG Atlanta came up, and uh, our Call of Duty team was fighting, and they made top 8, and they were going through all these things, and we invited all of the Panda staff, to come to Atlanta. There were uh, there were tons of people in Panda jerseys, and it
Yeah.
was on the MLG broadcast, like all the casters saying, where the heck did this come from?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, it was crazy. So, um, you know, uh, having a staff is so important, and trying to include as many people as you can to be fans of that organization, and try to get them to fall in love with your brand is huge.
Yep, I agree, and me and Patrick talked about this also. Is I'm a big Gary Vee stan, like really bad. And he asked, and this kind of goes to what we're talking about right now. Is they asked him like, how do you hire for VaynerMedia? Like, what's your process? Like, do you look at resumes? Do you prefer non-college graduate, college graduate? And he's like, I have never looked at a resume one time out of anybody I've ever hired. Like anyone he's personally hired, he has never looked at
Okay,
a resume. And three out of his
Halsey.
like inner set staff members he hired off the street. So they came up to him and said like, I want to work for you. How do I do it? He's like, can you move to New York? Like there's videos on YouTube about this. He's like, can you move to New York like next month? They're like, yes. He's like, all right, let's talk. And he gave him the job. Like, and he just said that that's
Crazy.
kind of going to what you're saying is like if someone has a passion for something and they truly want to do something, like that person can be more valuable and more beneficial than someone maybe that even has the requisites to do it. And that's not hitting on the person that did go to college and did do it, because you're a college
Totally,
graduate. I'm about to be a college graduate with
totally.
mine, so I understand it. But going back to what you said, like having people that just dedicate and want to be a part of the organization can sometimes be extremely beneficial for the org and for the person.
Yeah, especially in content where it's more about your portfolio than
Hmm.
anything else. Like, I'm sure you went over this with your talks with Patrick too, but there's a lot of very talented photographers, very talented editors, very talented graphic designers, motion designers who don't have a degree,
Hmm.
but you could look at their portfolio and see some fire, like some absolute fire. So, to that point, I totally agree that the piece of paper that determines your 4-year degree um, doesn't at all speak to your skill sets.
Yeah, I agree. And then, like in your position, like, or at least part of your position, like head of like content, like the management side of things, like because I feel like our demographic in esports is so different than any other industry. Whereas how you deal with people and how you can manage and connect people at young ages, or at least 25 and under, 26 and under age group, is really beneficial. And you don't need any prerequisites for that. Some people are just naturally good at it. Obviously, you want the prerequisites to kind of like get your foot in the door, but after that, you don't need a whole lot more besides those intangibles in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think as esports goes on, like I hate to be this kind of like Debbie Downer, but it's getting legitimate, and it's getting to the point where you almost have to get a degree.
Yep.
Even if it's a motion design field, we're kind of at that cusp where you can just look at somebody's portfolio and tell them that they're good and that they're hired, but we're gonna get there in like 2 to 3 years. You're not gonna see people without degrees or certificates hired in esports. I think we're eventually getting to that where it's gonna kind of standardize with the rest of business.
Yeah, it's already been doing with Hitmarker Jobs, which is obviously a very popular esports
Yeah.
posting site. Like even them, like I can't get a full time job in esports for about 2 years, but I always periodically look at like what marketing jobs, what social media jobs are on the table, like stuff like that, full time paid positions, and I'd say 90% of them already 4 year bachelors or associates at the very
With
minimum,
experience.
with 3 to 5 years of experience
This is
in that
crazy.
field. Which to me, there's a whole other conversation about that to me.
Yeah.
And I understand as an employer, it's hard because you can literally play both sides of the coin with it. However, like it's just pointing to what you're saying. Like when we're like 30 in our early 30s, it's going to be like a legitimate industry where you're going to need degree, you're going to need work experience and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and
So
I think the word work experience is so misleading in esports because a lot of people have work experience that they're not documenting.
hmm
Especially when you're doing these internships or you're working pro bono for an organization. Like people aren't writing this down. People
mm-mm.
aren't like, yeah, I worked for Panda for 3 years. Like some people wouldn't put that as work experience. Some people I've seen people submitting esports resumes to me for jobs that we have at the Cavs, and I know for a fact that they've been on a bunch of orgs. And the resume that they submit is like, I worked at GameStop for this many years. Like, we don't care about that. Like, you need to document your esports work experience. And sure, you might not be collecting a paycheck, but a paycheck does not matter for work experience. So I think
Yeah,
that word is very misleading.
no, I agree. And Ben Merck, obviously we know him. He agrees. He said the same thing. Like when I was
Yeah.
telling about my resume, is like I have Panda Game on my resume. As short as I was there, just for references, I have Astro Authority and I have Impact. I didn't get paid on any of those orgs,
Oh,
but it shows like, and I have documents and stuff I built while I was on those orgs, especially Impact.
good. Yeah.
But yeah, like that's what you gotta do. It doesn't have to be a paid full time position in order to
Yeah.
be successful.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a good gist of how that happened. So your history in esports, you're building, got to Panda. So I guess now the next thing to talk about is your process of deciding to go, put yourself out there for the 2K League as a whole and the Cavs Legion, and just how that went from start to finish.
Yeah, so I didn't have any connections in 2K really. So at Panda, I don't know if you remember, but we actually had a 2K team. We signed a 2K team for like
You're gonna
I'm
kill me
telling
that I don't remember that, but I don't remember
no,
that.
but I'm telling you it was maybe for a month, like
Okay. Okay.
because the 2K League was announced and there was a rumor, it wasn't confirmed, but there was a rumor that non-NBA teams couldn't be a part of the 2K League and it turned out to be true.
I do remember that rumor. Yeah. Yeah. I
Right.
do
And
remember
so after we heard about that, we let go of the 2K team off their contracts.
that.
But it turns out all of those guys under Panda made the league, and I was in touch with them, and they're like, "Yeah, this is awesome." I was trying to collect intel from a lot of people. I actually saw uh, uh, one kid on Twitter saying he applied for the Milwaukee Bucks 2K League director of esports. And I said, "What the hell is that?" Like I had no idea what the
That's a
hell.
position. Like
I said,
what?
"What the hell?"
Yeah.
That I had no idea what any of this is. So I dug more into it. Had a search going on Indeed and Glassdoor, and applied to everything I could. And there were only a couple open positions. There was only the Cavaliers, the Bucks, and Sacramento, who I saw that had open positions. I think a lot of teams did their hiring initially under the radar, which is really shady,
Or
but
maybe
that's
they did a
fine.
local hiring or something like that. Yeah.
Sure. I found out that a lot of teams actually hired internally from their sports organization.
Which,
Um,
yeah, I can see that. Okay.
So, like, when they created this esports department, they just kind of like picked somebody up and assigned them, and they're like, "Hey,
hmm
we don't know what's going on, so here you go."
Yeah.
But I think the Cavs, the Bucks, Sacramento, they all did this the right way, where they put feelers out. So I didn't know anybody at the Cavs or anything, and really just applied with my Panda resume, sent them a bunch of the marketing materials. We all did. We had the marketing deck. We've had pitch decks. We've had a ton of collateral that we've used at Panda. So
hmm
um, they wanted to see what kind of marketing materials I had. I sent them everything, like sent them a zip folder with, everything that I had a hand in helping with.
hmm
And so that actually got me the interview, which was awesome. So I just applying online, they inquired and said, "Hey, can we see some stuff?" Sent them the stuff and got the interview from there, which was awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember me and you weren't like, it's not like you were updating me daily. It was just like I remember you DMing me because I was just interested on like flying out there and like the interview process and like doing all that, which had to be a little nerve wracking for you. At least it would be nerve wracking for me. Like I always tell people, like just get me in an interview room and I'll be fine. Like
Right.
the nervous part for me is like figuring out how to tailor the resume and tailor the cover letter and tailor like the initial email and or call to at least get you up there. If you can get me in the room, I'm fine. But the way
Mhm.
you did it was like you said, like we both said, is you skipped a bunch of steps that normal people take and you went
Yeah.
straight for like the throat of full time esports, pretty much. Like,
Yeah.
so that had to be a little bit nerve wracking. At least I would think it was.
Yeah, and Cleveland was a 2-hour drive from Pittsburgh. So
Mm-hmm.
when I went in for my first in person, I think I had like 3 phone interviews before they invited me to come to the arena for an interview.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of long phone calls, and finally they invited me in for an interview. I drove 2 hours up there. I think my interview was only a half an hour. I think I showed up an hour early and drove 2 hours back. They invited me again next week for a second in-person interview.
You better
I ki-
hire me. Like,
I know, I kid you not. They're like, "What days work?" I'm like, "Any day." And meanwhile, I'm a senior in college and I have classes. I'm like, "Any day is fine. I don't care." And skipping school to go to a job interview. And I go
gosh,
down.
you're a better person than me. I would have been like, let me check my calendar just to make it seem like I'm like somewhat important. And
No,
no,
I'm
I'm
like
just kidding.
always open. I'm like,
Yeah,
"Nope, whatever works."
yeah.
So I go for my second interview. It's 15 minutes with the CMO. Her name is Tracy, and she is delightful. And I met her for 15 minutes, and then I drove 2 hours back. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is crazy." And so
Did they know you were driving that far?
yeah, they knew.
Okay, that's
They're
funny.
like, "Are you sure? Do you need a hotel room? Do you want to like stay?" I'm like, "No, it's
We
fine.
gotta
I'll
hire
stay."
this girl. She's dedicated.
Yeah.
No.
So um, they offered me the position over the phone, which I was super stoked about.
Hmm.
And the only problem is I was still a senior, and I could graduate early. So instead of a May graduation, I actually uh, applied for early graduation that I could end in December.
Hmm.
And it was October when they wanted to hire me at the time. So there was about 2 months until I got my diploma. And they said, well, we can hire you part time and you can work remotely until December, and then
Hmm.
we'll transfer you to a full-time employee when you hand us the diploma. I said, awesome. Accepted it. And I didn't have classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays for my senior schedule. Like that's
Hmm.
just how I wanted it. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I drove 2 hours to Cleveland, did the 9 to 5, and drove 2 hours back.
Gosh. Wow, that's
And
crazy. I
they're
didn't
like,
even know that.
you could do this remotely. I'm like, no, I'm a part of this organization. I want to be a part of this. This is really important to me.
Hmm.
I want to be here. And I think that was a really important part of of kind of like showing them my work ethic.
Hmm.
And didn't even walk at my graduation ceremony, just got my diploma the same day I drove to Cleveland. I said full time. And they're like, perfect, click click click, boom.
Oh my goodness, that's insane. I didn't even know that until just now. That is. I mean, yeah, you would have to. If I was in your situation, I would have done the same thing. Like, you have to
Right,
show them you're committed
right.
to it. And 2 hours sucks, but like, there's people in DC that commute an hour and a
It
half
could
every
be
single day.
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like I know people that literally, counting the like subway and stuff, take an hour and a half commute one way into work.
yeah,
So
it could be way
it
worse.
could be way worse. So yeah, when one thing I'm interested in is your take and thoughts on the initial like workflow and how it was going. Like, because it's kind of like how the CDL is starting up right now, where you are starting in a league that's also just starting itself. It's not like you're coming into like the Overwatch League or coming into whatever that's already been established. Like, everybody's learning as it's going along.
Right.
So how is, I think a lot of people, especially maybe even Call of Duty fans, would be interested in like how that process and how you handled all that.
I love this topic.
Yeah.
Because since it's the NBA, so for context, the NBA 2K league is a joint venture.
Hmm.
It's 50% owned by the NBA and 50% owned by Take-Two, who's the developer of the game.
Yes.
So everybody at the league offices in New York was also learning. So there was no prior knowledge of anything. It was all sports guys, and it still is a lot of sports guys. They've done a good job recently of hiring esports people at the league office. But to start, it was all sports guys, and they wanted to follow sports themes, sports themes, sports themes, sports themes. And I think season one, we kind of broke them down. We, as in all of like the esports hires in the teams,
Hmm.
kind of broke them down and said, "Hey, we're esports. We're
L-
different. It's a
let me
lot
let
different.
me sit you down for a minute and let you
Yeah,
know how this works. Like,
listen to this, bud."
yeah.
And so while they're learning about esports, we had to learn a lot about sports,
Oh yeah.
and how this is going to go because at the end of the day, we are an NBA team.
Hmm.
We are an NBA franchise that is an NBA sanctioned league.
Yep.
So we needed to learn a lot. There were a lot of retail rules about territories. So for context, this is probably the same with the CDL.
Hmm.
I don't know for a fact, but you can't. Um, travel out of your marketing territory. So for us in Cleveland, we have a radius of like about 60 miles. So we get Pittsburgh, we get a little bit of Buffalo, and
Mm-hmm.
we get most of Ohio, and besides Toledo. And most teams have these territories where I couldn't take a Cavs t-shirt or a Cavs Legion t-shirt and go to Indiana and say, buy this.
Okay.
Because Indiana, like the Pacers, have that territory.
Okay.
So there were a lot of learnings on our side of NBA regulations, NBA rules, NBA law, NBA contract,
Mm-hmm.
that we're still learning to this day. So I think it was kind of a two-way street with both traditional and non-traditional
Mm-hmm.
kind of teaching each other. It was a lot of learning. Um,
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting thing you bring up because I know me and Anthony talked about it on the Impact podcast as far as franchising,
mhm,
and I think a lot of people in esports, like this is kind of a hot take for me personally, but a lot of people in esports say like franchising is bad for esports because it limits your marketing capability, it limits the global brand that's esports. And to me, like the only thing I'll say about it is to me that's just a lack of creativity, but that's just
mhm.
me. I think there's a definitely ability to market a local, like have local activations and borderless activations. Like there's ways to do it, but I didn't even know personally the marketing territories that you guys had. So that would definitely make it a little interesting from an esports purview. Like if you're thinking in the mind of
Right.
an esports marketer, like how am I going to do this the most effectively, especially in a brand new league where I'm sure like you had a certain budget, you had a certain like dollars matter. Like every dollar y'all spend matters. So doing that not like efficiently and effectively probably was very difficult.
Yeah, and a little confusing at first too, because besides the marketing territories,
Mm-hmm.
another rule that they kind of threw at us was IP.
Oh, okay.
It was actually, as Cavs Legion, we can't use this Cavaliers logo. Like we can't, as Legion, post anything to do with the Cavaliers or the Cavaliers players.
Oh, that sucks. That's
Yeah,
all I'm
I
gonna say. That
know.
really sucks.
So apparently, we're the NBA is one of the only sports leagues that has this, but they have a CBA, which is a contractual basketball agreement
Yep.
with the players. They have a union,
Mm-hmm.
and the players can receive a portion of revenue if their IP is used,
Yep.
including the team's logo. So for me to post a photo, like if I posted this on the Legion account of me wearing this hoodie,
Mm-hmm.
say somebody like LeBron James at the time or Kevin Love or Tristan Thompson could say, "Where's my money?" So we are still not allowed to do that, and um, to this day, they're still working on the language
Mm-hmm.
of that agreement and what that looks like. So hopefully within the next year or year and a half, we'll see some changes and some more allowments for IP. Maybe it's like one basketball player can represent the 2K team or whatever that is. But we'll
Mm-hmm.
see these tweaks come out as needed. But when the league started, that was a shock for me. Me working out of the arena and being called Cavs Legion and not being able to post anything was just like this huge bummer. Because
Yeah.
all the creativity kind of goes out the window. But at the same time, it's like, okay, since none of the teams are allowed to do this,
Mm-hmm.
we're on the same playing field.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the same rules. It's not like one team's allowed to. Um, so, we worked really hard, myself and Patrick, to kind of try to differentiate the Legion from other teams by
Mm-hmm.
using more unique tactics and trying to make the Legion itself a brand and not just saying, "Hey, we're Cavs Esports." Like, no, we're the Legion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And going back a little bit to what you said is there's one, I totally understand the player's perspective. Like the NBA is known for giving power to the players, and I think that's why from like an NBA marketing perspective they're doing so well. Like unlike the
Yeah,
NFL where the NFL is all about the association, like it's all about the shield, whereas NBA is like, no, we're gonna market individuals because individuals sell tickets. The
yeah,
Cavs
yeah.
doesn't sell tickets. LeBron James, Tristan Thompson, that's who sells tickets, and I think they did a really good job. But for you as an esports marketer, like coming into the 2K league, I'd be like, okay, my greatest yes, I want to develop my own brand. Yes, I want the Legion to be the Legion. I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, that's the Cavs 2K team. I want them to be like, no, that's the Legion. But
Right.
at the same time, just starting out, like your biggest asset would be that C on your chest. So
Yeah.
and to take that away, like I totally understand why. Like I'm not hitting on it,
Yeah,
but to
yeah,
take
and
that away is
and and
difficult.
that rule of IP was in place before the esports league started.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a rule, and when the esports league was created, it's like, oh, we have to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Now there might be exceptions for esports coming out, hopefully.
Yeah.
But at the time, it's like there was nothing we could do about it because that contract was already in existence before the league started.
Yep. And obviously, you guys are bouncing ideas on how to make the Legion their own brand, so I won't even go down that rabbit hole. But like you said, separating it so like there's goods and bads with everything you do. Like even passing out jerseys in the Cavs stadium, like there's really goods to that, but there's also like the challenge. I don't want to say bad, just challenges to that, which is trying to separate yourself from the Cavs. Um, Kind of going back to what you said at the very beginning of this podcast, stuff like, going into an esports arena in downtown Cleveland and maybe seeing a CavsLegion shirt up on the wall, like stuff like that could help. But yeah, that's definitely a challenge I see for y'all going in. Now that you've explained all that, I can see how that's a huge challenge going into the new season, like trying to keep your brand like its own entity, basically.
Yeah, it was really hard, especially in the off seasons. So the way the league was structured is we had the players in market for about 4 months, and the other 8 months the players could go home. So they
Mm.
made a salary of about $35,000 besides prize pools. So the top earner of season one actually got over $100,000. Um,
Wow.
and so they only have 4 months of work,
Mm.
and then they go home. So we pay their their apartments, their utilities, everything while they're in season. So off season, they can go home and do whatever they want. For
Okay.
us, marketing and content wise, for 8 months out of the year, not having players,
Oh.
only having, we have three full time staff members on Legion. How do you make content for 8 months? Like it was, that's definitely the hardest thing in my professional career was mentally trying to overcome this whole thing season
Hmm.
one.
Yeah, and this is me not doing my homework like I normally always do. But are there any notable like I guess content content creators best word for it, content creators in the 2K scene that are attached to a 2K League team, like how the Mutineers right now have Optic Maniac as a content creator, or old Optic Maniac. Like, does the 2K League teams have anybody on their staff like that?
They do. They do it. They don't do it necessarily on staff. They do it in the form of like an independent contractor.
Okay.
Um, so instead of like working 40 hours a week in office, it's different. They
Hmm.
they work remotely and they let them stream.
Okay.
But the NBA still has rules and regulations around how much we have to pay them. Like we're not allowed to do pro bono contracts with people. Like, and this might be just a Cavaliers rule where we can't have somebody work for us for free. We
Hmm.
have to pay them in some capacity, even if it's low. So there are a couple teams who have wised up and have hired some streamers as independent contractors
Hmm.
who stream 2K and are popular in 2K. So I think we'll continue to see this, especially as revenue grows for teams and they can start spending a little bit more.
Hmm.
I think at first it was hard to justify spending money on streamers when you could be hiring staff.
Oh yeah, year one, you're not even worried about that.
You're
Like
not even worried about
I
it.
totally
Now,
understand.
now,
Yeah.
now, I'll shout out the Raptors, like Raptors Gaming. They do a great job with influencers and influencer marketing. So, they're kind of a step ahead, in terms of streamers and influencers in the 2K realm.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. That's definitely a challenge. And talking to you and Pat and a couple other people, like, and you know how it is. Like, you're totally okay with me saying this. Like, when you're an esports fan, like, you only can consume so much esports, like, at a time. So like, you
Yeah.
can't be abrushed on every single esport out there.
Oh
Like,
my God, never.
I played 2K my whole life, like 100%. Owned every 2K
Yeah.
up until I'd say like 2K like 16 or something like that. Then I kind of slowly got away from it. But I haven't watched a lot of 2K League solely because I'm watching CS, Call of Duty, Halo, like
There's so many.
just so especially League. Like, I'm a League fanatic, so I
Yes.
know you are too.
Yes.
Like, I have the hat on. We're good.
I love it.
But yeah, so I want to get in more to that, but so I apologize for any of the questions I'm asking that
Oh my
maybe
God.
seem like I don't have a background like I should.
Oh, no, no, no.
Um, but yeah, moving into year three. What is your main? I mean, you kind of already alluded to it a little bit, but what is your main focus as the Cavs Legion? Like, what are you going into year three focusing on that you're allowed to give
Yeah.
out?
So one of the cool things, and one of the highlights of my professional career was really cool is, at the end of season two, which was only a couple months ago,
Mm-hmm.
we went to league meetings in Indianapolis, and the league had me present to all the teams that were there our style guide. So we actually were one. We were, I think, the only team to create a unique style guide booklet, like PDF booklet for its gaming team. So
Mm-hmm.
we went through with our designers and created, you know, all the brushstroke patterns. We created what these look like what emojis we're gonna use, and like basically like our our Bible, so to speak,
Okay.
of content. So I got to pitch that basically to everybody, which was really fun. But one of the things that we're working on right now is our season 3 style guide. So we
Mm-hmm.
don't want this booklet to stay the same. We want every year there to be some kind of flair, some kind of change, but there to be reasons behind those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna be announcing ours pretty soon, like in about a month, and kind of have a video highlighting all of our designers that have been working really hard behind the scenes on the style guide
Mm-hmm.
and what that means, and when the players come in, what that means for them. So whether it be our slogans or what we're going to be having them do in content videos, all revolving around our themes for season 3,
Mm-hmm.
I think is what sets us apart, where we really get granular. Like our designer's amazing, where he literally had like 40 different brushstroke patterns, specific brushstroke patterns that he wanted to use.
Jeez.
No, no,
Okay.
like he's the best.
Yeah.
Um, and we went with a playbook theme last year where we literally got this huge white piece of paper and had a Sharpie and drew X's, O's, and arrows and lines and everything and scanned it so that we could manipulate the shapes and use it and like have plays in our headers, like actual basketball plays, like running
Okay.
in our headers. So, this year we're kind of moving away from the playbook theme, and we have a brand new theme coming out. But I think expanding on the little stuff
Mm-hmm.
is really important for off-season content. Like even something you think wouldn't be relevant is kind of cool to learn about.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, and I agree, and that's like you talk about learning something every day. Like I always try to learn something every day, and you just brought up something I've never thought about, and I don't think it's been really done in esports a whole lot. At least if it has, I'm not privy to it. Is like with branding and concepts and themes and styles, like evolving that year after year. Because like the only thing I can really reference it to is League of Legends, as far as like how they do yearly. Like they did Rise of the Elements, and before that was,
yep.
like that's how they're keeping the game fresh. Because if League just
Mhm.
kept releasing new champs but didn't have any theme or like
Yeah,
style to
gotta
it,
keep it fresh.
yeah, it wouldn't be as popular. And I think even popular esports teams, I won't mention names because it's no point, but like really tier one organizations, like I can't think of times where they've like changed their theme up. Like they may have an activation they're doing
Right,
that's themed, but as far as like the brand itself and the designs and just then the details of everything, like refreshing that. Like normally
yeah,
when a tier one organization refreshes that, it's like a
it's a
big
big deal.
deal. Yeah, it's
Yep,
like, hey guys, we are rebranding X or we are going in this direction. It's this
yep.
huge thing. It's not a yearly thing by any means. So that's a really interesting thing that I've never thought of, and that's a really cool concept
Yeah,
overall.
like obviously our colors will always stay the same, like our
Mm-hmm.
color scheme, but the way we use our colors is different. So like last year, we went with a lot of wine and white, and this year, we're going with a lot of wine and black. And it's just like what that means because, uh, sorry, my voice.
No, you're
Like
good.
our esports facility is named the Lair,
Mm-hmm.
so we want to be a little creepier. We want to be a little darker. Like
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So the style guide and our videos that'll come out all kind of reflect this new style of
Mm-hmm.
of Cavs Legion. What that means to us.
Yeah, and from a consumer standpoint, that gives more sense of belonging over course of time because like 100 Thieves is a good example of this. Like you get a certain content drop or a certain thing, like a year. Like I got the original white cream hoodie, so like a year they re-released it, which upset me. Uh, but like you can say like I was there during that time frame. Like I had the
Yeah.
wine and black. Like
Yep.
when they originally released, like 3 years from now, they originally released the layer. I was the one who got the original content drop, or merch drop or whatever it is, and it creates a sense of belonging and like keystone memories inside that consumer's brain when they're like following the Cavs Legion, which is really nice.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's a really cool concept. I'm glad y'all are doing it. I know season 3, like just by talking to you and Pat, like I'm going to be watching it a lot more.
Appreciate it.
Um, one because I love 2K as a whole. Like I always played it, and two because I think it's a really good league. Um, so hopefully it continues to grow. But as far as you yourself, obviously your goal is to build the Cavs Legion into the greatest esports organization the world's ever seen. Like I understand that, but for you, because this is a hard question to ask. Like esports professionals, is what are your goals in the future personally? Like as a content creator, it's easier. Like I'm trying to build my brand, I'm trying to do X, whatever. But as an esports professional, like what are you learning to do personally that you're trying to build towards in the future?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think diversity and inclusion is big. I think
Mm-hmm.
esports has such a softball like layup when it comes to diversity because anybody can play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think tapping into that personally is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, battling sexism and, making sure that everybody, all shapes and sizes are included.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me is like a long-term goal is how can I at CavsLegion, how can I as Halina Malik be looked to as, that person who is um, you know, helping to implement diversity and inclusion into esports and
Mm-hmm.
speaking about it. So personally, for me, like that's really big. Like I want any kid in the world, any person in the world to feel comfortable walking into our esports facility and saying,
Mm-hmm.
I'm welcome here. Or to watch a Cavs Legion game on Twitch and say, oh, this is for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of organizations, especially popular ones, some I won't name, are not very inclusive, especially when it comes to their hiring processes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's not a lot of top tier organizations who will look at females the same way as males.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even that being said, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
That's kind of what I want to do.
no, yeah, that makes total sense. And like I said, I won't say names, but even ones that do hire females, like, because me and you more so, because I know you have more experience than me, but we see like the nuances and how content's actually being presented. Like, you don't just watch the YouTube video and then click close. Like, we see you look past like the initial announcement is the way I put it, and even ones that hire like female content creators, female staff, like they are long term, they are not marketed and presented the same way. Like it's just a fact. And as a
Yep.
male, I can say that with 100% confidence. So yeah, I totally agree. Like I think esports is ripe for just diversity from gender, from race, from size. Like you really can be anybody. I mean, it's what esport is it with the guy that he has the disability. He's like one of the greatest like fighting game. He's in the fighting game community. He's like one of the best fighting game players in the world. Like he's not like top like Sonic Fox, but he's up in that realm. And
Okay.
he has a disformity, but anyway, he's able to like compete at a super high level, and like he's super popular in the community. I forgot his name. It's killing me now. Anyway, but yeah, it just shows you that anybody can do it and anybody can be successful if given the chance. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's a really good point. Um, on that point though, too, since we're on like a more serious topic too, is what advice I have two. It's a two-part question. What advice would you have for someone just getting into esports? And you can tailor this to marketing, or you can tailor this to esports in general. And then, what advice would you have for somebody that's wanting to do it full time? Like they've done a couple orgs, they've done some pro bono work, and now they're like, okay, I want to make this a career. Like, what's
Mhm.
next? Type thing.
Yeah. Write things down, even stupid stuff that you think is not important. Like, I attended this seminar. I spoke here. I went to listen to somebody here. I went to this event. Write it all down because it all matters. Even if you think it's stupid, like even you going to MLG Columbus,
Mm-hmm.
that's a networking event. You
Yeah.
can say that you attended an esports networking event.
Mm-hmm.
Like that already sets you apart. So things that you think are minutia, little, trivial is not. So anything that you do, if you are helping somebody on a project, like document everything
Mm-hmm.
because it all matters. Like I don't know how many resumes I see that are incomplete just because I know that guy and I know he's done a lot more than what he wrote down on that paper.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that is really like that's something I'll be that honest because I'm all about transparency. Like I don't do that 100%. Like
Yeah.
on my resume does not show the 6, 7 esports events I've been to or the
Oh
packs.
yeah.
Like it doesn't show the little like it shows three main. What I chose at the three main organizations I work for, and then sub bullets on like what I did in each organization, and then I have references. But yeah, even me myself, I don't do that. So that's something that I 100% want to work
Yeah,
on.
it just adds a little more flair.
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, you know what I mean? It just adds a little more something that somebody can look at and set you apart just from a one-page resume. That's
Yeah.
really tough.
No, I agree, and especially in esports now, where we've talked about this. Like I personally DM'd you and was like, because I was talking about my bachelor's degree. I was like, should I do something more
Yeah.
broad scoped or something more specific? And if I remember correctly, you and Ben both said the same thing, where it was, put as like, yes, you want specific, but at the same time, like all these little things like that can help like set you apart. I think both you and Ben gave me that, similar to what you're saying now. It's
Yeah.
just any little thing that you think would be like useful or like would be that the
Yeah.
organization could use, like that's really important right now
Yeah,
because people
I
want.
was team captain on a Call of Duty team that sucked. But point is, I was team captain.
Yeah.
It's a leadership quality. It sets you apart. Like
Yep.
little things will make such a big difference.
Yep, leadership quality in an esports capacity, like not
Right.
just in normal life, which is good as well. But yeah, that's a really good point. That's a point I think a lot of people overlook because people are trying to professionalize themselves on resumes and trying to sound as smart as humanly possible, and there might be a fear of judgment, I guess, because you do maybe have that one shot mentality when it comes to like presenting your resume. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely understand what you're saying from that. But yeah, overall, like those are amazing points that you brought up. I didn't know if you had anything specific. I always ask people this, like, what specific after like talking everything we talked about, like, what specific is there anything else that you would want to talk about, if at all?
Yeah, I think I think something that sounds really dumb is also remembering people,
Mm-hmm.
remembering faces, remembering names. Um, you know, like uh I there was a kid who interviewed me to get into Panda, and he was, 15 at the time. And I remembered his name, I remembered his gamer tag, I remembered his face. And he was asking for some esports advice, and somebody tagged me in his tweet and was like, maybe Halina can give advice. And he's like, um, I've never connected with Halina before. Could you send me an intro? Like, I'd love to connect. And I was like, hey, bud, you actually interviewed me to get into Panda. Like, I've known you for
Oh
a
God,
long
I
time,
I don't
and,
want
and
to be
not,
in the
not to
room when he
knock him,
read that message. Yeah,
and I don't think of him different.
yeah,
I'm just saying he would have known me and known that he could reach out to me anytime.
yeah.
And it's just really important to remember people, and even if you're not talking to them on a daily basis, once a year, just like check in with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because even your online networking, you don't have to be face to face to network with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so remembering names, remembering gamer tags, remembering things about people, so even like in your contacts, even if you write, like what I do is, I got this tip from my dad one time that was writing down people's significant others' names or
Mm-hmm.
their pets' names if they don't have a significant other. And that way, next time you talk to them, you're like, "How's Susie? How's your dog?" And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "How did you remember that?" And it leaves such a big impression on people.
Yeah, it does. Simplest commonalities and overall just remembering one thing, remembering even something as simple. And I've learned this in my job in the military. We can talk about after the podcast is remembering like the type of coffee someone drinks or like little stuff like that. Like if you're meeting someone on a recurring basis or something like that,
Yeah,
like that goes so long because it shows you actually gave a crap about the person as a whole and like care about their life a little bit because you're not going to go through that effort if you don't. Very few
yeah.
people at least. So that's a really good point as well. But yeah, overall, Helena, like I always have trouble ending these podcasts because I want to keep talking. Like completely honest, after recording like 7 of these things, like my hardest part of the whole podcast is the outro because to me, I have 6 other things I could talk about if I felt like it. Um, but overall, like I just want to end the note on thanking you personally for like sharing your background, sharing your story. Like I said in the intro video, I think someone could take your story from multiple different facets: marketing, esports professional, as a person, as a content creator, whatever it is, and take something from it and glean something from it for their own personal life. So I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And last thing I want you to do is if you want to shout out any socials, maybe the CavsLegion socials, whatever you want to do, for where people can follow you at and the Cavs Legion as a whole.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast and saying such nice things. Like, I don't, you're the best. But for the sake of my voice, I'll make it short. My personal handle is at BlondeVenom, and then the handle for the Legion is at CavsLegion GC. Our season kicks off in late March, so I would love to have more people tune in and kind of see what the league is all about.
Of course. Awesome. Yeah. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I will have all of Halina's socials linked below as well as all of the Cavs Legion socials linked below. So I'll do that. If you listen to us on Spotify, like she has said, at BlondeVenom, you can look at all her socials and kind of go from there as far as all the things she was listing. And if you also can go to mine at Samajama TV for everything and I'll be promoting this as well, especially this specific podcast, because the first one I actually know the date it'll go live. It'll be live on the 19th. And then following that, every Sunday we will have another content workshop podcast come out. I don't give a time specifically because it's whenever I can upload it that day with my full-time job. However, it will come out on Sundays. So if you guys want it on YouTube or Spotify, check it out there. But yeah, Halina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And if you want to say your last goodbyes, and then we'll head on out.
Should I have some really cool like outro? I wish I had like a slogan for myself.
Well, I wish I did too. Like I'm telling you, intros and outros for me are the hardest thing because not having editing software and just being an awkward child in the beginning, like it's so hard to do this.
Well, thank you so much, and to anybody who's listening, you can always reach out to me. I'm always available. I have my DMs open for a reason. I always reply to people, so would love to connect with anybody who's watching this who wants to talk more about esports.
Awesome. Yeah, and same goes with me, and I'll be the first one to vouch for what she's saying. She always makes time for people, even when I know she is so busy it's not even funny. I've hit her up several times, and she always is willing to talk to me. So, yep, thank you so much, Halina, and thank you for anyone else that is listening. Thank you for tuning into the content workshop, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.